This is the Extreme Stewardship Podcast, where we explore anything and everything that gets us better at making things good and good at making things better. Right now, I'm trying to get better at understanding and participating in the conversation that a lot of people are having about the theology of work. And at the moment, we're in the middle of a series on the specific topic of money as a function of the theology of work. So a couple of episodes ago, I posed the question, why would we make the theology of money a part of, a function of, a subcategory of the theology of work? And the reason is primarily that money is a creaturely gift from God. And work is the management, the stewardship, the facilitating of the improving of creaturely gifts from God, of which money is one. So it's the kind of thing that we use in our work. So we need to talk about it biblically in relation to work as a whole. That's the driving point here. And then in the last episode, I gave the first principle about a biblical theology of money framed by a biblical theology of work. And that is that there's no one right amount of money. Rather, what matters biblically is, first of all, our heart posture, that we are pursuing money, if we are pursuing money, as we are pursuing money, for reasons that demonstrate love for others and not love for self. And then secondly, what I do with the money I have matters more to God than how much money I have. It's not about the amount, it's about the stewardship. The results of my management of money matter because improving creation matters. That is what God made me to do. So that's the first principle. There is no one right amount of money. The second principle for this episode is fruit, seed, and weeds. Genesis 1 says that God created plants of various shapes and sizes. And one of the things he did when he created plants was that he created plants that already had fruit in them and plants that were seed-bearing. And I think in the initial phase of things, there's a very practical reason for that. Adam and Eve will be given the job of stewarding creation, starting by taking care of the garden. And so they're going to plant seeds, they're going to grow things, they're going to produce things, and eventually they're going to eat things. But it's going to take a while for the fruit of their labor to come out so they can enjoy it, so they can consume it and eat it and use it. And so God starts by putting fruit out there at the beginning so that they have something to eat, so that they can live while they do the initial phase of their work. But if I take that and zoom out and broaden that out a little bit, what I realize is by giving us both fruit and seed, God gives us some resources to be used right now. So I have a piece of fruit in my hands. I eat it. It's gone. It is an abundant but finite consumable resource that God has given for me to enjoy right away. And then I have seed. Seed is not to be consumed and enjoyed right away in general. It is to be planted so that it can grow, so that it can produce something to be enjoyed later. And so if I take my resources and I divide them up into these two categories, I have fruit to be enjoyed now, and I have seed to be enjoyed later. The third category is the weeds. God did not originally create an earth that was full of flourishing weeds that would choke out and consume and ruin the garden. If you've ever been a gardener, you know this. The weeds are the plants that grow without you doing anything. They come by it naturally, apparently. And so it takes extra work to get the weeds out of the way so that the fruit can be harvested and enjoyed, so that the seeds can be planted and grow. So when I look at the resources available to me, I'm going to put them in these three categories: fruit, seed, and weeds. Things to be enjoyed now, things to be invested in order to be enjoyed later, and things to be gotten rid of. So if it's fruit, eat it. If it's seed, plant it. If it's weeds, burn it. And I want to talk through a little bit of how all of these apply to money. Money can be fruit. Money can be a thing that I use right now, and I spend it and it's gone. It's a finite, God-given resource that I am allowed to, I am encouraged to by God use. when I buy groceries, we're going to eat that food and that money's not going to be there anymore because we used it on something and then we use the thing we used it on. And that's it. We're moving on. It is fruit. It is to be enjoyed right now. Money is intended by God in part to give us pleasure and sustenance and enjoyment immediately. Other parts of our money are given to us by God in order to be planted like seed, in order to be invested for later. And so when I save, I don't buy the thing that I want right now. I save for it. I invest my money. I gain interest from my money. I put it into a retirement account. I also use seed money for things like education and training and skill development. If I spend a certain amount of money to hire someone to make me do the work, which is what college students the world over are doing, they are paying us so that they can work. Well, that's not an awesome short-term investment. That's not fruit. That's seed, because there is a benefit, financial and otherwise, that comes out of paying for an education. So the money that I invest in getting a college degree, for example, is treating my money like seed. Now, you might wonder, okay, some money, spend it now, enjoy it now. Some money, invest it, plant it, let it grow into something to be used later. That makes sense. How can money be a weed? Well, many ways, in fact. Here's one. The last I checked, the individual storage unit business. So we're not talking about major warehouses, that sort of thing. We're talking about individuals who buy one of those little storage units that you see all over the place and rent it out monthly and that kind of thing. In 2025 in the United States, that was a $44 billion industry. $44 billion being spent to enclose things that we can't fit in our houses, that we don't remember having in the first place, that we don't use, therefore we don't value. So we are spending money to hang on to things that are themselves weeds, which is why we got them out of our house in the first place. But we haven't actually gotten rid of them. We are continually spending money, billions and billions of dollars annually, so that those things can sit there and continue to clutter up space. So our money is in some sense going to watering the weeds. How else can money serve as a weed or function as a weed? Well, let me back up for a second and notice that generosity and giving can actually fall into all three of these categories. When I buy a meal for somebody, that's fruit. When I buy coffee for my wife, that's fruit. When I buy a toy for my child, that's fruit. That's me using my money in a value exchange so that someone else could have something that gives them short-term pleasure. And that can be good. Money also can be given as seed. Charitable organizations and funding organizations will often talk about seed money. So major donors often come to nonprofits and so forth and say, hey, we want to put a big chunk of money away that becomes the fertile ground in which the whole thing grows. So we're not going to build the building. We're going to put a whole bunch of money down that you can use to gain other money so that eventually there's enough for a building. Or in the case of colleges and universities, for example, we have these things called endowments. An endowment is an investment account that is not supposed to ever go down at the level of the principal. So if a donor puts $1 million into an endowment, the university does not have $1 million to spend. The university has a minimal percentage of $1 million to spend so that over time, the amount of money in that account never goes below the $1 million. And so you can spend a little bit of it each year. And as long as your expenditures are staying under the amount of gain that investment is making, over a very long time horizon, you will end up with far more than the original investment. That's a giving for seed. I also make a gift towards seed when I invest in my children's education. There's a long-term financial benefit there. I am putting a little bit of money in now so that they can get a lot more money out of that later. So generosity and giving can function as fruit, can function as seed, and can also function as weed. If you're curious as to how giving can function as weeds, first of all, you might just check out the book When Helping Hurts by Steve Corbett and Brian Fickert. You might also imagine the number of times that parents, let's say, have given substantial gifts to their children at points in time at which their children are not prepared to steward those gifts well. We hear stories regularly of 16-year-old gets a Ferrari for his birthday. 10 minutes after he got his driver's license, next thing you know, he's killed himself and somebody else. That is an example of money being given not as fruit to be simply enjoyed in a good way now, nor as seed to be invested for the long term, but as a weed, in which case the gift itself is part of the problem. The generosity is just getting in the way. Another example of this, the 4th century Christian John Chrysostom gave a sermon in which he came down rather hard on exorbitant interest rates. And his point went something like this. Jesus said, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." Therefore, there is this wonderfully odd sense in which the invitation to follow Jesus is an invitation to do things that are easier and simpler than the things that we do under the enslavement of sin. And his specific example was this. If you loan money to someone who is in need and you charge this exorbitant interest rate on that money, well, what you've done is enslaved them. You've put a chain around their neck and a chain around your neck, because now you have to deal with bookkeeping. You have to deal with accounts receivable. You have to deal with quantifying how much interest has been earned. You have to deal with all of the logistics of collection. You have to do a ton of work that you have put on your own shoulders because you wanted your money to make more money in a particular way. And then he says, you know what would be way easier is if you just gave them the money or loaned them the money without interest. How much less work would it be for you if you just loaned them the money interest-free or gave it to them in the first place? So there is an example potentially of how generosity, or at least the appearance of generosity, can actually be a weed because it entangles us, it chokes us, it prevents us from living life in a free way in Christ because of all this extra burden that it's placed on us to keep track of the money. Money is a good gift from God to be enjoyed now, to give pleasure now. That's money as fruit. Money is also a good gift from God to be invested for later. When we invest for later, we gain things like security. Now, that's a tricky thing because I want to make sure that my sense of security comes from my place in Christ before God and not in how much money I have. And yet, at the same time, as people will often say, money cannot solve all of your problems, but it can solve your money problems. I sleep better at night because I am not worried about the bank coming to take my house tomorrow because I have paid my mortgage. Money has gained me a certain sort of security. We are right now, as I record this, in the process of purchasing a new vehicle. We love to brag on our 2 Hondas that have a combined 650,000 miles on them. We think that's pretty cool, but even Hondas are finite and will die eventually. And so we're trying to get a new van. And in the process of a new van, we want to get a vehicle that works. And it takes more money in general to get a vehicle that works than a vehicle that does not work. And so the money that I earn becomes the money that we spend to give us a sense of security when it comes to the fact that when I go to the garage in the morning and turn the car on, it will in fact turn on and get me where I want to go. That is not wrong. Earning to spend to stabilize one's life in those ways is a good gift from God, provided that sense of security keeps in mind that that is a good gift from God. I did not make that happen. I did not manifest it. I did not author it. I did not invent it. I did not create it. Every resource I have, even the ones that I worked for, are gifts from my Creator. And if I keep that in mind, investing for later keeps me from becoming the sort of person that James talks about when he says, "Woe to you rich, you will weep and wail for the misery coming upon you." And how about that person who says, I just have so much, I better just go build some more barns. And God says, you fool, you have no idea what's coming tomorrow. So can money be an investment for later that creates security and stability? Absolutely. Provided we keep in mind that it is from God, provided that we keep in mind it is for others, not simply for ourselves, and provided we keep in mind that the world is a broken place and sometimes the Lord gives and sometimes the Lord takes away. Either way, blessed be the name of the Lord. So money is fruit. Money is seed. Money is weeds. All three are real. Two of them are potentially good. One needs to be particularly watched out for. And I think that is about all I have to say about that. And until next time, thanks for listening to the Extreme Stewardship Podcast. My name is Michael Kibbe, and I teach Bible and theology at Great Northern University in Spokane, Washington. My behind-the-scenes partner in this endeavor is Ben Kibbe, CEO of Kibbe Consulting in Columbiana, Ohio. Our editor-in-chief is Liam Olmsted. Art comes from Leah Leanhounts, and music is provided by Dave Murray of Daradoon Guitars. If this podcast has been useful or challenging to you, shoot us an email, extremestewards@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. If you think it might be useful or challenging to anyone else, you know what to do. Ultimately, we hope that listening to this podcast has helped you get better at making things good and good at making things better.